I'm Pete Rucinski, Managing Director of Assured Technical. What I really love about Hayward Wright is how they use technology to enhance what they do as accountants. And I think we do that in many industries now, in every sort of walk of life. And what we do is we help businesses ensure that their computer systems and software are actually set up in a secure way, so they're available to you, and they're not at risk of being hacked or being unavailable and lost. We do various sort of cyber security audits and security audits with clients sometimes all over the globe. And sometimes we will sit there and ask a team member or a director in a company, what would happen if your computer was unavailable to you for a day? And the look on their face typically is of shock. It would be absolutely catastrophic. We can't do our business without our computer. But people don't always think about it like that. So what we try and do is give businesses some guidance and assistance to make sure that those computer systems are set up, configured and managed in a way that protects them and ensures that they are available. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the services we offer. There's one service in particular, which is a government scheme called Cyber Essentials, which is a framework or a standard that the UK government created to help UK business be more resilient. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. I'm going to talk about how it works to protect you as a business owner. I'll talk about the process you go through of complying with it and achieving the certification. And then I'll cover a few sort of areas and some pointers about how you can actually make a move, get the wheels turning and get started. And then at the end, along with Chloe, we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have. Okay, so what is Cyber Essentials? I've very briefly covered this already, but it's a government scheme that was designed back in 2014 to try and improve the resilience of UK business. The government, more importantly, National Cyber Security Centre over in Cheltenham, based at the GCHQ, could see the rise in cybercrime and the reliance that UK business has on IT systems, computer systems and software. So they created this framework, which has been rolled out across the UK and actually globally now for a number of years. In the early days, it was mainly focused at suppliers of the NHS, Ministry of Defence, local authorities, any sort of government supply chains. But then it rapidly took off and became more popular across normal industry, and almost as like a de facto standard for supply chain compliance. As an example, if you want to supply HS2 operation, you need to have Cyber Essentials certification just to get on the supplier list. That's before you actually win a contract. And there's many other sort of supply chain portals and contractual arrangements that require it. It's like a barometer of, is that supply business taking the correct precautions with regards to cybersecurity, and are they reducing the chance of them having a breach and losing our data, or having a breach and actually it's the straw that breaks the camel's back and they go belly up, and therefore the customer loses a supplier, which can be just as bad as a data breach. I put this logo on here because the IASME Consortium logo, that's the organisation that actually managed the scheme on behalf of the UK government. They're actually based very close to us here up in the Malvern Hills. But however, they don't provide the certification as such. The certification is delivered through companies across the UK, which refer to as certification bodies, of which we are one. So how does it work? Cyber security, just from the name, can sometimes seem a little bit sort of smoke and mirrors. Cyber coins up all these images of space and everything being complex, and it doesn't need to be. The Cyber Essentials standard actually demystifies it quite a lot and breaks it down into some very achievable common sense controls. It shouldn't require business owners to go out and buy new hardware and software. It's more about how you're sort of configuring, setting up and using your existing software. The only caveat to that is if you've got extremely old computers, then they may need to be replaced because there's a certain degree of vulnerability that comes with an old computer that's not receiving updates and not being made resilient by the manufacturer who created it. Like I said, it breaks it down, and it's really, I coin a phrase, it's doing the basics well. It's things like having strong passwords, making sure you're doing the updates when updates are available, making sure that the right people have access to the right computers and accounts aren't being shared, making sure that you've got anti-malware software, so sort of antivirus software, as some people refer to it as. So each of those controls in isolation are absolute common sense. They make complete, they're not complex. But when you put them all together, they do create quite a nice layer of defense around a business, and they give business owners and leaders a framework to work to. Without that framework, cybersecurity can be a little confusing, because where do you start? Do I get an anti-malware system? Do I need to go out and buy new hardware? Do I need to go and set things up in a different way? And a lot of business owners don't know that. And they might go out to the market, go to various IT providers or on the internet and ask questions, and they might not necessarily get the right answers, and could end up getting led up the garden path, spending an awful lot of money on hardware that they didn't actually need to spend. So yeah, really doing the basics well. I'm not going to go into massive detail on this here, but the standard is broken down into 5 main technical areas. It's not so much focused on policy and process and paperwork. It's much more of a technical standard. So all it's concerned about is, are you actually doing these things in your business? Not have you written it down and have you duplicated it in triplicate or whatever, it's, are you actually doing it? Which is great approach for small businesses. You haven't got time to be creating documentation for documentation's sake, but you will put these control measures in place and you can enact them immediately, so that the drain on resource to implement these things is not too high. The 5 technical controls areas are, as I've detailed here on the slide, the main areas that the standard looks at. First one being boundary firewalls. That sounds, to non-technical people, what the hell is that? But really, it's putting a wall or a layer of defense between you and your business and the open internet. That comes in the form of what we call a firewall. So in your router, either at home or in your office, there'll be some hardware in there that actually creates this sort of filter and a layer of defense to stop people from getting into your internal internet network from the outside. And it's as simple as that, really. Every house who has the internet has one of these. But there's some really simple things we can do to make sure that they're set up properly and actually working effectively as they need to be. Secure configuration is the next area, and this is a good one. And this is it's about setting your system up as best you can and reducing your sort of footprint and therefore your threat surface area. If you've got a computer that's got 15 different applications and you only use 3 of them, those are the 12 applications are sitting there, potentially not being updated, potentially not being used, but potentially also providing a landing place for malware or a virus to come in and take hold of. Because the way the malware works is looking for software that it has got a weakness in it or a vulnerability, and it will take advantage of that. So if you reduce your surface area down to just what you actually need for your day-to-day work, that massively reduces your threat and your risk of compromise from the internet and things like phishing emails or malicious websites. So, like I said, it absolutely makes common sense when you break it down, but sometimes can be a bit confusing before you look at it. Then we've got access control, and really this is just about making sure that only your staff and your team have access to the areas that they should, and also people from outside your organisation who might be passing through don't have access to your computer systems. Then we've got malware protection. Most computers come with a built-in software program which is looking for viruses and looking for malware, and it's continuously scanning your computer and also scanning websites when you go onto the internet. So it's providing a sort of almost like a little watchguard on the activity that's going on, and that's another one of the key controls. So the standard just requires that that's in place. And like I say, most computers come with it from new, so you don't have to actually go out and buy any of this thing. And then we've got patch management and updates. What does that mean? Well, really, patch management is just a fancy way of saying updating your computers. When you have a little pop-up in the screen, Windows or Google or whichever operating system you're using, Mac, says there's an update to come out, can you please install it? Typically what these updates are doing is somebody's found a vulnerability or a weakness within your computer software. People are out there, it's their full-time jobs looking for these vulnerabilities, and they don't always get discovered before the software is actually released and the computers are sold on the market. So when these vulnerabilities or weaknesses are discovered, the manufacturer of that computer or that software then sends out an update to patch or resolve that vulnerability. And that's really one of the major, as you see, one of the key controls of the standard. And that in its own can really help businesses stay secure by just keeping your systems up to date. Got a picture of a Mac on this screen. And I suppose really what I'm trying to say here with that picture is you have got the freedom of movement to use whichever type of computer system you want and apply these standards to it. So you don't have to have a Windows machine, you don't have to have a Mac machine, you don't have any other sort of weird and wonderful manufacturers' solutions. These sort of standards can be applied to whatever you've got, and you shouldn't need to go out and buy new hardware to apply them. Right, so the actual certification process from start to finish. A lot of companies may only, so there's two stages to Cyber Essentials. There's a Cyber Essentials basic level, which essentially is a self-assessment where you define the scope of your organization, how many computers you've got, what they are, how many staff you've got, etc. Then you comply with each of those control areas we talked about. But it is a self-assessment, and then that assessment is marked or verified by a third party such as ourselves at Assure. And once that's done, you're awarded that basic level certification. More commonly now, though, the supply chain requirements are requiring what we refer to as Cyber Essentials Plus certification. The first stage is exactly the same as I just described, as the self-assessment piece. But once that's complete, you have a window of opportunity, which is actually 3 months long, to complete what we call a technical audit. And that's where a company like ours will come in and we'll do some tests on your systems. When I say come in, we won't actually come into your business. We do it all remotely nowadays, but we used to come into the businesses. And we're not trying to trip anyone up here. We're just trying to prove to us and to you as a business owner who's invested probably a lot of money in your hardware and software, that your systems are actually working how you want them to work. They are protecting you from these threats. And we've got some quite interesting little tests that we run. We sort of simulate an employee stumbling along, clicking on a malicious email, or stumbling onto a malicious website and clicking on a link, which then tries to download and install a piece of malware. And these tests essentially prove that your systems are configured, set up and working as secure as they can be, and are meeting the standard. Once that's done, we will then award the certification. You can see on this diagram here, there's some loopbacks. Invariably, when you start this process, you're not perfect, and we do encounter non-compliances and issues. Our approach at Assure Technical, this is not a problem. It's normal for things not to be perfect, and we'll work with our clients to advise on how you can make corrections, remediate the problems, and then we'll just quite simply continue to conduct the test again and then move on to the next stage. So there's nothing wrong with starting the journey knowing that you're not going to be perfect. And what I'd actually advise against is trying to make everything perfect before you start, because what can happen is you can go down a rabbit hole trying to do something that you think you need to do that you don't actually need to do. That can waste time and money. So I'd strongly advise against that. Just start the process. And specifically with us, there are companies out there that do this process that don't necessarily have this approach, and they will fail clients going through the process and then possibly charge you to do it again. But that's absolutely not our approach. We've got two aims and objectives in this process, and one is to provide the certification which you may need for supply chain requirements and advertising on your website, etc., proving that you've met the standard. But also, secondly, but probably more importantly, is making sure that your systems are as secure as they can be. And we don't see finding an issue or a non-compliance during the process as a negative. We actually see it as a positive because it's better for us to discover it than somebody else. Okay, so getting started. Once you decided you want to do something like take some measures to improve your business resilience, especially from a cyber perspective, just have a think about your scope. Now, we can assist when you're going through this as well. You know, how many companies, is it just one company you're certifying, or do you run two companies that share the same hardware and software, and maybe the same staff, but you've got two separate limited companies that are operating out the same area? There's many sort of different sort of configurations here, and we can advise on how you can make the process as efficient as possible and get the best bang for your buck, essentially. And then you also, things to consider is, you know, do you have contractors or support staff that are coming in to support your organization? And you should really be, if they're part of your team and they've got your email accounts and they're accessing your data, you should be considering them as part of your organization and scope from a cyber perspective, and ensuring that they are complying with the standard as well. Otherwise, you're left with this sort of almost like backdoor into your system where people are coming and going but not complying with your required controls. And then really it's just about aligning with the right provider. So we've been providing this certification since 2016. We've been in business since 2011, and we've helped hundreds and hundreds of companies, UK-based and globally, improve their cybersecurity and the generic security. We've been working very closely with Hayward Wright for a number of years now. We actually do their certifications, and you know, we'd like to offer this to Hayward Wright clients and connections to help improve that resilience. And I think there's like a really heavy focus on technology now, as I said right at the beginning, and this is one of the things that, you know, shouldn't be overlooked either. Finding a certification body, naturally, I'd say, you know, obviously come to us. But there are hundreds out there. You know, there's 300 odd, and it's the usual due diligence thing. You know, align with one that's got your same values. You can communicate with them. You can do business with them, and they're meeting the standards that you require to do business with as well. Another interesting and useful aspect is having a knowledge of your sector. We deal with many different types of business. There are some commonalities, but there are some business areas where there's some idiosyncrasies. So checking on knowledge of those idiosyncrasies is really worthwhile. And then the final point really is, if you're looking to go through to the Cyber Essentials Plus level, you should find a provider that can actually take you all the way there. There are some providers that provide this sort of certification that only do the basic level. So that would steer your choice somewhat if you're going all the way to the plus level. I'm sure there may be some questions around this later, but that's generally, don't put it off. That's what I say. My biggest point to doing something like this is, if you're worried or not sure about your cybersecurity in your business, just take action and do something about it. And you will feel and be a lot more confident as a result of that.